Hi, welcome to Top Farmers Know-How. I'm Amanda. Today we're going to talk about how to have a useful dry cow consult with your vet. At the end of each season, you have a catch-up with your vet to figure out which dry cow therapy to use. But if you also want to discuss how to improve mastitis management and milk quality for all of next season, this is a great opportunity to do that as well. How can you best prepare for this conversation? Well, thinking about improving mastitis management is the same as thinking about any other challenge. First, figure out where you are now, then decide where you want to be. Finally, pick the best way to get from here to there and keep checking that you're on track along the way. The dry cow consult's the chance to talk with your vet about all the different roads you can take. But to make that conversation useful, you can bring along the starting and ending points. To figure out where you're starting, remember that there are two parts to the mastitis problem. The clinical cases are the animals you treat throughout the season because you see changes in their milk or quarters. But these are just the tip of the iceberg because there are also subclinically infected animals in your herd. Their milk and quarters look normal, but they have high cell counts for some of the season, and they may be spreading mastitis to uninfected animals in the milking shed. Figuring out the current state of mastitis on your farm requires measuring both clinical and subclinical infections. But how can you do that? For clinical mastitis, it's great if you have accurate computerized or written records. If computerized, make sure your vet has access to them prior to your consult. If they're on paper, bring them with you. It's helpful to have a tally up of cases by month before the consult and see if you can count up the number of cows which have had more than one case, and the number of cows which haven't cured despite treatment. If you don't have clinical case records, you can estimate clinical cases by adding up the mastitis treatments on each month's vet invoice and dividing by the number of cases each box or bottle would treat. So for example, if you purchase 4 boxes of mastitis treatment in November and you know each box treats 5 cows, then the number of clinical cases in November was approximately 20. For estimating subclinical mastitis, bring along any bulk milk somatic cell count records you have, ideally for the last few seasons. Herd test information is also helpful. If you don't herd test, a list of positive RMT cows is valuable if it's performed reasonably close to drying off. And while it may be hard to measure, impressions and preferences relating to the treatments that you've been using are really important when you're developing a mastitis management plan with your vet. Gathering all the info we've just discussed will help you figure out your starting point. But how can you decide where you need to be? Remember, there are 2 main goals of mastitis management: cure existing infections and prevent new infections. Use industry benchmarks relating to each of these goals to define where you want to be. As with any benchmarking exercise, take your own system into account when you're setting targets. If you have an older herd structure, if you're unable to cull for mastitis, or if you have a dysfunctional milking shed, then target continuous improvement instead of holding yourself to these benchmarks per se. But with that being said, an effective dry-off should cure more than 70% of subclinical infections. This means that if 10 infected cows are dried off, 3 or less should have high cell counts or clinical cases around calving. An effective dry-off should also result in fewer than 1% clinical mastitis cases during the dry period. An acceptable calving mastitis rate, for example, less than 8% of calving cows per month, and an acceptable bulk milk somatic cell count early next season, for example, less than 150,000. You should also have no mastitis-related deaths after dry-off. Here are some additional dairy NZ and Smart SAM mastitis metrics, which are influenced more by shed management during lactation. Ideally, more than 85% of heifers should have cell counts less than 120,000, and more than 80% of mixed-age cows should have cell counts less than 150,000 at each herd test. Target a monthly clinical case rate of less than 1% per month after calving, and try to reduce or eliminate grades. So in summary, here again is a list of what to bring to your dry cow consult: clinical case records, bulk milk somatic cell count trends, herd test info or RMT results, impressions and preferences about lactating and dry cow treatments, and your goals for mastitis management. If you bring all this to your dry cow consult, you'll be able to talk with your vet and get a clear picture of where you are now, where you want to be, and how best to get there.